My name is Sergeant Rick Donovan. I served 2 tours in Iraq between 2006 and 2010. Most of my time there was spent patrolling hostile territories, surviving roadside bombs, sniper fire, and extreme heat. But none of that ever haunted me the way this one mission did. What happened wasn't recorded in any official report. And no one in my unit ever talked about it afterward. Not because we weren't allowed to, but because we didn't want to remember. We were stationed near the Syrian border in a remote forward operating base called Outpost Vega. Just sand, barbed wire, and the occasional blast wave from nearby firefights. It was hell. One night, around 0200 hours, our commanding officer called 5 of us into the tent. There was a recon drone that had gone dark a few clicks out in the desert. It was doing surveillance near the ruins of a small ancient village, someplace not even on our maps. Intel said it was abandoned decades ago, possibly centuries. But the drone had picked up something strange before the feed cut. It wasn't enemy movement. It wasn't a technical glitch. It was a still image of a figure, tall, thin, inhumanly lanky, standing in the center of the ruined village. It looked like a man, but distorted. Like something was wrong with the proportions. It had no visible face, just a smooth patch of pale gray where the features should have been. Then static. The commanding officer told us to go retrieve the drone and confirm the area was clear. We thought it was some twisted joke. Maybe one of the techs was messing with the feed. But orders were orders. So we loaded into the Humvee just before dawn, me, Corporal Diaz, Private Collins, Lieutenant Harris, and Sergeant O'Reilly. As we drove into the sand, the radio started to get fuzzy. That wasn't surprising. Communications always got worse the further we went. But this was different. It wasn't static. It was like a distant whispering sound, barely perceptible, crawling under the noise. Diaz kept adjusting the frequency, but it only got worse. Then something really strange happened. The GPS started glitching, showing that we were already inside the village, even though we hadn't reached the location yet. And then it went completely dead. We eventually spotted the ruins through the shimmering desert heat, a circle of crumbling stone buildings, half buried in the sand. No movement. No signs of life. Just silence. We stopped the vehicle and approached on foot. The air felt wrong. Like it was heavier. Thicker. Diaz even asked if we were near some kind of radiation source. But our Geiger counters were clear. Collins looked pale, said he felt like something was pushing down on his chest. We split into 2 groups to sweep the ruins. I went with Diaz and Collins. The other 2 went the opposite direction. The buildings were strange, way older than anything I'd seen in the region. No Arabic writing. Just strange symbols etched into the stone, like spirals and runes. At one point Collins called me over. He had found what looked like a well in the center of the ruins. There were claw marks around the stones. Deep gouges. Like something had tried to climb out. We were about to radio Harris when we heard him scream. It wasn't a normal scream. It was guttural, desperate, like he was being torn apart. We rushed toward the sound, weapons drawn. When we got there, there was blood. So much blood. But no sign of Harris. O'Reilly was standing a few feet away, completely frozen, his rifle at his side, eyes wide. He didn't even respond when we shouted his name. It was like he had mentally checked out. Diaz touched his shoulder and he collapsed, like a puppet with its strings cut. Unconscious. We dragged him back toward the Humvee. That's when we saw it. At first, we thought it was a trick of the light. A shadow that shouldn't have been there. But then it moved. It was the same figure from the drone image. 8 feet tall. Thin as a rail. Skin like old leather stretched over bone. It had no face, just a smooth blank surface where eyes and a mouth should be. And its limbs, God, its limbs, they were too long, with fingers that touched its knees. It tilted its head like it was studying us. Then it started walking. Not running. Just slowly stepping toward us. We opened fire. All 3 of us. Rounds hit it, I know they did, but it didn't bleed. It didn't fall. It just kept walking. Then the world went silent. Not like quiet. I mean completely silent. Our gunfire made no sound. The wind stopped. Even the crunch of sand beneath our boots was gone. I screamed, but couldn't hear my own voice. The sky started turning dark, like an eclipse. Diaz grabbed O'Reilly and screamed at me to run. I hesitated. I didn't want to leave them. But Diaz shouted one last time, I heard it, like it pierced the silence, and then pushed me toward the Humvee. I ran. The last thing I saw was the thing grabbing Diaz by the head and lifting him off the ground. Then I blacked out. When I woke up, I was back in the Humvee, engine still off, keys in the ignition. O'Reilly was in the passenger seat, awake but staring forward, still unresponsive. Collins was outside, kneeling in the sand, just humming. A lullaby. Something I'd never heard him hum before. There was no sign of Diaz. No sign of Harris. No blood. Nothing. We drove back to the outpost in complete silence. None of us spoke a word. We couldn't. Something had changed. When we got back, the CO asked what happened. I told him we didn't find the drone. That the place was empty. I lied. Not because I wanted to, but because something inside me knew we weren't supposed to speak about it. Collins was medically discharged a week later. Psychological trauma. He wouldn't sleep. Wouldn't talk. Just kept drawing that same faceless figure over and over. O'Reilly went AWOL 2 months later. Just vanished. His bunk was empty. No one ever found him. I was sent home after sustaining a leg injury during a patrol. Honorably discharged. You'd think I'd be happy to be out. But sometimes, when I'm asleep, I see that village again. I see the ruins. The well. I hear the silence. And sometimes, I wake up with sand in my sheets. I try to research that location. No record. No coordinates. Nothing. As if it was erased from the maps. Or maybe, it was never really on them. A few months ago, I got a letter in the mail. No return address. Just a single sentence typed on a piece of paper. Don't look back into the sand. I burned it. But I still remember every word. And last night, I woke up to humming. That same lullaby. Outside my window were footprints. Barefoot. In the dirt. Leading straight to my door. The end. Story 2. Signal from Echo Base. They say war brings out the worst in people. But I never knew how literal that could be until we got the transmission from Echo Base. I served in a recon unit during a long-forgotten conflict in a desolate mountainous region that borders no country you'd ever visit. Our mission was usually boring: patrols, supply escorts, the occasional engagement. But one night changed everything. It was midwinter, the kind of cold that sticks to your bones and makes your breath feel like glass in your lungs. Our squad had just returned from a 5-day recon sweep. We were resting inside the main barracks when the distress signal came in. At first, it was just static on the comms. But then something cut through. Echo Base, requesting immediate evac coordinates. Then, garbled screaming. Followed by a low, mechanical-sounding groan. Then silence. We all froze. Echo Base was one of our remote outposts, about 80 clicks west in the White Vale mountain range. It was mostly a comm relay site, manned by a skeleton crew. Nobody had heard anything from them in over a week, which wasn't unusual due to frequent storms and interference. But that broadcast felt wrong. The scream didn't sound human. It was stretched, guttural. Like someone in unimaginable pain, or worse, like they weren't screaming on their own. Our captain, a hard-ass named Derlin, didn't waste time. We're moving out. Bravo squad, prep for cold weather recon. We're heading to Echo. I should have objected. We were exhausted. But something in that message had sent a shiver deeper than any cold. We set out at 0400. The trip up the mountain was brutal. Snowdrifts waist deep. Visibility, almost zero. But we were trained for this. We reached Echo Base by nightfall. Or what was left of it. The station was wrong. The tower was still standing, but the outer walls looked like they had been torn open by something massive. There were claw marks, deep, impossibly wide gashes, across the doors and siding. And then, the smell hit us. I'd smelled rot before. But this was different. It wasn't just death. It was metallic, sickly sweet, and somehow wet. Like the air itself was bleeding. We entered through the torn open door. The inside looked like a slaughterhouse. Equipment was scattered everywhere. Blood splattered across the walls, frozen mid-drip in the cold. One of the bunks had a boot still sticking out from underneath. When Private King pulled back the blanket, the body underneath had no face. Not torn off. Just missing. Smooth, like clay wiped clean. "What the hell happened here?" someone whispered. Then we heard it. A soft tapping sound. coming from below us. The base had a sublevel. Storage. Power core. Communications. We descended slowly, weapons drawn. The lower level was pitch black. Flashlights flickered as we moved deeper. We found the comms room door hanging open, bent inward, like something forced its way through. Inside, the comms equipment was destroyed. But something had been written on the walls, in blood, or something like it. Jagged, almost symbols. Not a language. More like a warning. In the center of the room was Sergeant Havers, at least, what was left of him. He was strapped into the comms chair with cable wire, eyes wide open, jaw dislocated. His face was twisted in a permanent scream. His fingers were missing. All of them. Cut clean. But the MIC light was still on. As if someone, or something, was still transmitting. Corporal Juno stepped forward and reached toward the MIC. The second she touched it, the room exploded with sound. A low hum, rising into a shriek. It pierced our ears. Private Marlowe dropped to the floor, bleeding from his nose. My vision blurred. Then, just as suddenly, silence. Then we heard it. Footsteps. Not ours. Slow. Heavy. But wrong. Like wet meat slapping against metal. Juno backed away from the console, flashlight scanning the room. Nothing. Then, the hallway lights flickered on. Just for a second. And we saw it. A tall, thin figure standing at the far end of the corridor. No face. No eyes. Just smooth, pale skin stretched too tight over bones that jutted at unnatural angles. It twitched once, and charged. We opened fire. Rounds ripped into it, but it didn't stop. It just kept coming, jerking and twitching like it was being controlled by strings. Marlowe screamed as it grabbed him. In one motion, it tore his chest open like paper. His scream cut off instantly. We ran. I don't remember how we made it out of the sublevel. My memory is a blur of screaming and gunfire and that thing chasing us up the stairs, its limbs bending in ways they shouldn't. We sealed the door behind us and dropped a grenade down the stairwell. It exploded, but all we heard after the echo faded was that same tapping. Still going. We set up an emergency beacon on the roof and waited for evac. But the storm had worsened. We were stuck there for the night. We took shifts guarding the exits, but none of us slept. The tapping never stopped. Neither did the whispers. They started around 0200. Soft. Almost like a radio just out of tune. I thought I was hallucinating until I looked over at King, who was staring into the corner of the room, eyes wide, mouth moving. I shook him. "What are you doing?" He just whispered, "It knows we're here." Then he pulled out his sidearm and shot himself in the mouth. We restrained Juno after she tried to walk out into the snow barefoot, claiming she saw her sister calling from the storm. She didn't have a sister. By morning, only 4 of us were still sane. Evac finally arrived. When we returned to command, they put us into isolation for debriefing. But they didn't ask the right questions. They just took our weapons, burned our clothes, and told us we were suffering from extreme psychological trauma due to altitude exposure and isolation. Bullshit. I know what we saw. What we heard. I got discharged a month later. The rest of the squad. 2 committed suicide. 1 went missing. Only I'm left. And here's the thing. Last week, I got a package. No return address. Inside was a tape. Labeled, Echo Base, Raw Transmission. I shouldn't have played it. The audio was corrupted, mostly static, but in the background, just faint enough to miss unless you were really listening. A voice. Speaking in that same rhythmic whisper I'd heard that night. Repeating one phrase. You brought it back. I don't sleep anymore. I hear the tapping at night. On my walls. My windows. In my head. I thought it was all over. But this morning, I saw footprints in the snow outside my door. Bare feet. And they led straight to my bedroom window. The end. Story 3. I served in the military for 8 years. Saw things I'll never forget. But what I'm about to share wasn't just trauma. It was something else. I've never told anyone, not even my therapist. Because it doesn't make sense. And because if you believe it, you'll lose sleep the way I have for the past 10 years. Back in 2013, our unit was deployed to a remote region near the border of Afghanistan and Pakistan. Classified location. High mountains. Harsh winds. villages carved into the cliffsides like ancient scars. But this wasn't your regular deployment. We weren't there for recon or combat. This was a recovery mission. A team of 6 operatives had vanished during a covert op. No trace. No radio signals. Not even signs of a struggle. It was like the earth had swallowed them. My unit, 10 of us, were sent to investigate and recover. Simple in theory, but from the moment we landed, something felt wrong. The villagers wouldn't talk to us. Not out of fear, but something deeper. Shame. Dread. Like they knew something and refused to speak it aloud. We set up camp in an abandoned schoolhouse. Windows shattered. Dust everywhere. But it gave us shelter from the cold night air. That first night, we took turns on watch. I had the 2 a.m. shift. At exactly 2:17 a.m., I heard a noise I will never forget. Screaming. But not just any scream. This wasn't fear or pain. This was madness. Like someone was being torn apart mentally and physically. The sound echoed across the mountains, but no one else seemed to notice. I ran to wake the others. They heard nothing. Altitude's messing with your head, our sergeant said. Get some rest. But I knew what I heard. The next morning, our tracker, Corporal Haynes, found something. A trail, old boot prints leading away from the village and deep into the wilderness. We followed it for 5 hours, through narrow passes and over frozen rivers. Eventually, we came to a wide open field. Just grass and silence. Not even birds. And then we saw them. 6 rifles standing upright in the ground, evenly spaced, each one with a helmet on top. Just like we do for fallen soldiers. But there were no graves. No bodies. Just those eerie makeshift memorials in the middle of nowhere. We scanned the area, weapons drawn. That's when Jenkins noticed it. On the butt of one of the rifles, scratched into the wood, was a message. We can still hear them. That was the moment I felt it. A pressure. Like the air itself was denser in that field. My ears rang. My vision blurred. And the screaming, it came again. Except this time, we all heard it. It wasn't around us. It was inside us. Some of the guys dropped to their knees. Haynes threw up. Our medic, Ortiz, started crying. It lasted maybe 10 seconds. Then it stopped. Silence again. We left immediately. No one spoke. We hiked back in total quiet, not even acknowledging what had just happened. But that night, everything fell apart. At 3:14 a.m., Jenkins started screaming. We found him outside the schoolhouse, clawing at his ears, yelling that he couldn't turn them off. He was bleeding. From his ears. His nose. He kept begging us to shoot him. To make it stop. We sedated him and radioed for medical evac. But the bird never came. That was the next strange thing. Command had gone dark. No response. No orders. Nothing. We were on our own. That night, I had dreams. No, not dreams. Memories that weren't mine. I saw flashes of those 6 missing operatives, huddled in that field, blood pouring from their eyes, laughing and crying at the same time. One of them was digging into the dirt with bare hands, screaming about getting under the skin of the world. I woke up covered in sweat, heart pounding. Jenkins was dead. He'd bitten through his own tongue and choked on his blood. The next day, 2 more of our guys tried to leave. They made it about 500 meters before we heard gunshots. We found their bodies side by side. One shot the other, then himself. And they both had smiles on their faces. At this point, fear had turned into something worse. Despair. The kind that breaks your mind slowly. We started turning on each other. Ortiz accused Haynes of sabotaging the comms. Haynes swore he saw one of the dead guys walking around at night. I believed him. Because I saw it too. I was on watch again. Just past 2 a.m. when I saw movement beyond the trees. A figure. Still. Watching. I raised my weapon, but my arms felt like lead. I couldn't move. The figure stepped forward, and I saw his face. It was Sergeant Miles. One of the 6 who'd gone missing. But his face was wrong. No eyes. Just skin stretched over empty sockets. His mouth moved like he was whispering, but there was no sound. And then he smiled. Not with his mouth, but with his whole face. Skin twitching, lips tearing at the edges. Then he was gone. I didn't tell the others. But one by one, we all started seeing things. Hearing voices. Sometimes in English. Sometimes in languages none of us spoke. I caught Ortiz trying to peel the skin off his hand. Said it wasn't his. That he was wearing someone else's. We lost 2 more to suicide. One walked straight off a cliff like he was sleepwalking. The other slit his throat with a shattered piece of mirror. By the 5th day, there were only 4 of us left. We made the decision to burn the schoolhouse and get out. Whatever this was, it wasn't natural. We figured we'd hike west and hope to catch a convoy or friendly patrol. But the land, it changed. We passed the same dead tree 3 times. Compass spun in circles. GPS said we were in the ocean. Time didn't work right. The sun rose twice in one day. Shadows moved in the wrong direction. And at night, the screaming field came closer. Like the mountain itself was shifting to reach us. That last night, the world broke completely. Haynes walked into the fire. Just walked in. Didn't scream. Didn't flinch. Like he wanted it. Ortiz started convulsing, whispering something in a guttural voice that didn't sound human. Then he stopped breathing. Only me and Sergeant Lowell were left. We sat back to back, guns loaded, waiting for the sun to rise. But it never did. The sky stayed red, like it was bleeding. And then the ground opened. I swear to you, the earth opened. Not an earthquake. A hole. Like a mouth. From it came hands. Black, rotted, twitching. They reached up and grabbed Lowell. He screamed my name, begged me to shoot him. I froze. He was gone. I ran. Don't know how long. Hours maybe. Eventually I collapsed in the snow, and that's where they found me. A rescue team. I was the only one left. They claimed we were caught in a blizzard, lost contact, and my team was buried in an avalanche. That was the official story. But I know what I saw. What I heard. There was no avalanche. No snowstorm. There's something in those mountains. Something old. It feeds on trauma. On war. Maybe it's always been there. Feeding on the cries of the dying since the first man picked up a weapon. Sometimes, I still hear it. That scream. At night. In my dreams. Sometimes not even in dreams. Just, behind the wall. In the silence. And the worst part. I can't tell if it's calling me back. Or if I never really left. The end.